Hi. Well, this is tremendously exciting. It's tremendously exciting in a very literal sense. So my name is Will Pye, and this video is the brutal, unknowable truth. Subtitle, What the Happened? So the subtext and the context for this video, I went in to have neurosurgery on September the 27th, about 54 days ago from now, and was expecting to be out after 5 days, maybe a week, and it took a little while longer than that. I got home a week ago, and this video is really to share a little bit more fully what happened. People have asked me what happened, what went wrong. Sort of to respond to a few friends. I've got a joke or two I'd like to share. And it's for me to get back in the saddle, as it were. I really enjoy sharing, and I've shared a few videos from the hospital. And this is literally exciting because the amount of energy and attention that had to go in to me getting here with my wheelchair there is significant. The blank canvas behind me is a reminder that whatever you perceive in me, you're simply projecting your own shadow. Okay, that's a bit of an odd start, isn't it? Well, I won't be perturbed. So, So I went in to have this surgery to have a second resection done on a brain tumour that was in my upper right parietal, so up here. And the initial mapping for this surgery indicated that it was, neurologically speaking, a long way from the motor strip. That when I spoke to the neurosurgeon just the other day, he was quick to point out that no, the motor strip and the tumour were very much in the same place, which I can confirm from my experience makes perfect sense. So the surgery was in some respects a success. I didn't die, I didn't have a stroke, though what did result has been hemiparietal paralysis, temporary, most of it, we hope, and very comparable, very similar to the after effects of a stroke. Very curious conversation with my neurosurgeon. He apologized to me. And I received it, but also, so, of course, these things do happen. And he said, I'm sorry it happened to you. I thought he did a pretty good job of handling a really difficult conversation. So what did happen to me? Well, when I woke up, you can see what's happened to me. My left shoulder is still relocating itself in space. They had to be a little bit more argy-bargy with the motor strip than they had hoped to be. When I woke up, I had pretty much no function, no feeling in my entire left side. There was even a little bit of slur in my speech. And happily, over a month, I spent a week in the neuro ward. And then after a week in the neuro ward, I was transferred to a residential rehab unit where I spent about 5 weeks. And after a month, I had recovered a lot of the strength in the left side, so I could make big movements and push back against the doctor's hands with both my leg and my my arm. But as you'll see, and as you'll perhaps see from me how I interact with it, my brain is still relocating, it's mentally mapping, neurologically mapping where this is. And so there's, okay, that's tripping me out a bit watching that. So as you can see, I'm very much in the discovery of what happened in terms of what that means right now. The daily discovery of what has happened and what's now happened. You know, what has that night's sleep allowed to recover? What has all the therapy that I'm doing allowed to recover? So I did actually write a few notes for this talk, or this sharing, or this video. So one thing that happened is a pocket of air was left behind in the brain, which is not actually that dramatic. It's you may have a pocket of air in your brain. They happen. It's not that uncommon after surgery. It's a concern. Pneumocephalus, I believe it's called. Not as bad as hydrocephalus when there's water in the brain. Vastly not as bad, far from hydrocephalus. But there was some concern about what that pocket of air would do in terms of affecting the frontal cortex. So clearly the motor strip damage has had a profound effect upon my left side, both awareness of and function of. So I currently have a wheelchair and a frame. I have a brace and a AFO, forget what that means, something orthopedic, on my left leg because my ankle can't support itself currently. And that's one of the jokes I wanted to tell. When I got home from hospital and delivered the shower chair and the wheelchair and the frame and urinary bottles and all of these exciting devices, I looked at my wheelchair, and the brand of the wheelchair is, wait for it, Karma. I have to say I laughed out loud because that's obviously one wisdom tradition's response. What on earth happened? Well, karma, cause and effect. Something happened and something else happened, and here we are, essentially, through eternity. Am I being punished for a past life? Rewarded for a past life? Being given an extraordinary opportunity to progress into the next incarnation? I mean, who knows? What the tests have revealed, cognitive tests and so on, is that the effects of that air pocket are not significant, if anything. So my memory, my capacity to speak, to formulate concepts, to plan, to recall, to organize memory. Memory is not frontal cortex, but it kind of is. The way that we sort memories and make sense of memories is frontal lobe. Did I say frontal cortex? Forgive me, I have a brain injury. So this is what I'm being told, that I have a significant brain injury. Not just in the sense of the damage to the motor strip, but also one or two other things. And that's actually going to share some of my experience around that, because it's been profoundly challenging these last couple of days, and it interrelates with some beautiful messages I've received from my friends Louise, Alan, and Nick. So there was also a build-up of cerebral spinal fluid between the wound and the cranium. So I had a bulge, really literally about that big, here, so my head was deformed. And as you can see, that's not really the case now. It's reduced significantly. Just in the last couple of days. It's taken about 6 weeks, but that has resolved itself. There was an attempt to resolve it. The neurosurgeon had me down on the operating table again in the ICU, just because that's where they have a spare sterile area, and they inserted large cannula needles, which were difficult to get in because obviously there's not a lot of flesh around there, so they had to really have a few goes and wiggle them in order to try and withdraw the fluid. And they weren't able to get much out, so they were massaging the wound, getting this cerebral spinal fluid to ooze out. And it was excruciatingly painful and a great opportunity to drop deep into meditation. My practice came in handy. And I spoke to Mitch, the neurosurgeon, Arsenal fan, poor soul, as this procedure was unfolding, and I explained how my teacher Junpo said to me once, Will, we meditate so we can be useful when shit happens. And I think it's fair to say I was useful in that procedure, allowed Mitch to get on with his job without too much distraction or any wailing or painful cries or flinching or whatever. And it didn't do anything. The fluid just built straight back up. So they then offered to do a lumbar drain, which would have involved sticking a needle in the base of my spine. You can probably sense I was not so keen on that idea right from the get-go, particularly seeing it was on the same rationale as why they'd just done the previous completely hopeless and unsuccessful procedure. It's like, we kind of think that if we withdraw a bit of the fluid from here, it may drain from up there as well. And I was like, that's what you said last time, guys, and it didn't work. So with the risks of this one being paralysis and so on, I've got enough of that. So let's just let it sort itself out. And by grace and by the beauty of these bodies, the intelligence of these bodies, and perhaps by the increased exercise I've been doing the last week or two, as I've been at home and able to utilize the frame and start to really get serious about the physical physiotherapy as opposed to the non-physical physiotherapy. That perhaps has helped stimulate the blood flow and the energy flow to support the blood flow reabsorbing or absorbing the excess cerebral spinal fluid, so now I don't have a deformed head, or not as deformed a head. So that's beautiful. So on the one hand, there has been extraordinary recovery and observable neuroplastic relocating, perhaps. There's a sort of dual process. On the one hand, the brain is recovering just simply from the trauma of the brain surgery, and the area around the motor strip, of course, is recovering. There'll be some reconnecting, rebuilding of synaptic connections, of cells themselves. And potentially the damage is so significant there that there may be relocating of motor strip function. And of course all this takes a little while, and it requires the functioning, the activity of the body that is absent and lacking, such that the brain will know, we need to do that again. We need to work out how to move that hand, how to not only put that finger and that thumb together, but hold them together so I can actually meaningfully hold a piece of paper. Because what happens, it looks, great, we can do that, but no, I can't, because when I try and hold something, it just slips off. My hand forgets itself. I burnt my shoulder in the shower because I was pressed against this hot tap, and I could feel, I was like, wow, there's a deep muscular tear or pain. But it was only after a few showers, a few days, 3 times, that I looked and was like, oh no, I'm burning myself. The feeling is so dulled And the awareness of that is so limited at this point that it was possible to cause considerable pain. Probably did a good job of letting the brain know that there's body there and nerves there and reconnections to establish. So that probably gives you a sense of the degree to which there is a journey ahead of recovery, of remembrance, of rediscovery, of healing. And so much of that has happened already, and there's certainly a great deal to move forward with. And I've got so much that I want to share, but I also want to keep this video relatively short. And I want to speak to an experience I had, which I think quite nicely captures some of the difficulty and challenge that this body, mind now faces. So it was maybe 2 days ago, I was just noticing that a couple of friends who, friends here in Melbourne who, I thought, we've been friends for a long time, and I was just sort of noticing that I hadn't heard from them, and I was kind of surprised because I think they would have heard through another friend about what's happened with the surgery and the disability and the brain injury and so on. And I was just feeling a little sad that I hadn't heard from them. And so let's summarize that thought as I haven't heard from my friends. And then this morning I awoke and I had 2 messages from a couple of dear friends from years back, one here in Australia and one in the UK. And I found myself really upset by the messages. And the upset was, one message was just so superficial. It was just, how are you doing? And I was like, it just seemed such a useless question. And for me to answer that with any meaning, it would take me quite a while and a lot of my energy and capacity. And you haven't really invited that because you just said, how are you? And then the other message, it was beautiful. Really, just like the other, they're both beautiful messages. And I want to be really clear, like part of me knows they're just exquisite messages from dear friends asking how I am. The other message, it sort of described a bit of a process that one might go on in an experience like this. And it seemed to presume that they knew something of my experience. And the mid-word of this brutal, unknowable truth, I cannot possibly put into words this experience. It's utterly transcendent. It's so disorientating at times. It's so frustrating at times. It's so neurologically overwhelming at times. It's so emotionally overwhelming. And I really felt anger at this little pretty packaging of this experience. Of course, that's what I do. I package my suffering in a pretty story or a pretty narrative. And there was truth and wisdom in what was being spoken to, but my experience was this anger. Like, what am I supposed to do with that superficiality? What am I supposed to do with that presumption of my experience? And so this extraordinary grief and this extraordinary anger, like fury, arose. And an awareness that this was an entirely inappropriate response to my friends messaging me. And an amusement as I recalled yesterday, wondering why these other friends hadn't got in contact. another friend had messaged me a few days back saying, how are you going? And no hurry to respond, so I happily took some time. And they messaged me again today to say, how are you doing? Maybe they'd forgotten they'd messaged a few days ago. So now I was like feeling a bit overwhelmed, and now I was overwhelmed with the prospect of having to reply to another friend. So part of this video is to reply to those 3 dear, dear friends who have so kindly and thoughtfully reached out to me. And to really speak from that overwhelm, and that it's not too difficult to access here and now. Unfortunately, I have a exquisite partner who, we've been in the practice of relating, including when intense emotion arises, more often over this last 2 years when intense emotion perhaps arises for her. And it was just really beautiful today to speak to her and say, hey, look, I've just had these messages and I'm just really not knowing how to respond, knowing that the emotional response that is here is unskillful, disproportionate, and I want to be open with my friends. I want to say, this is what came up when I received your message, by way of answering, like, this is what's true for me right now. And I was able to be in dialogue with my partner, and for her to share how some of the overwhelming responses that she's had to, you can imagine from her perspective, her ambulant partner went off to hospital, expected to be back in a few days. He comes back 6 weeks later with a very different set of physical circumstances and more. And the stress that's put her under, and she's had similar responses at times that she's felt. I don't want to be feeling this in this moment. I don't want to be responding to Will's suffering in this way, or whatever it might be. So it became this really sweet, really beautiful, spacious, present dialoguing and sharing for each of us that led to a deep emotional catharsis and release for each of us. I sense that mine actually maybe hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of snot and tears to release, and it's such a blessing to be in a relationship with such a precious open heart and wise soul that can hold space as I've held space for her. And so what was true for each of us was how our job is to be welcoming of those moments of overwhelm, or those moments of, who knows, collective or personal, deeply held subconscious rage or whatever. Or, simply those moments where the limited functioning of the brain in its current state simply is not able to deal with the data points, with the stimuli that are coming through in a way that is reasonable and proportionate. So, mental note, have tissues ready when you share about your experience at the moment, Will. So that probably gives you a pretty good overview, an update of where I'm at 54 days on from the surgery, at home, amongst the trees, amongst the clear air, the fresh air, the much more minimal EMF pollution, with my partner who's just cooking me the amazing meals. I've got a beautiful protocol that I'm utilizing to maximize the chances of reversing the disease of those cells in my brain and restoring perfect health to my brain, and of course facilitating the recovery from the brain injury, from the deficits down my left side. And I'll share more of that in a video on another day, because that's pretty involved and pretty in depth. And yeah, I'm probably wanting to end this video to keep it relatively short. And in terms of prognosis, I did want to sort of say, like, you know, what's happened, what's the clinical perspective, what are the predictions so far as they have any meaning or any significance. So let's start with the brain cancer, shall we? So, same deal, the pathology indicates it's a mixture of astrocytoma and oligodendroglioma cells. So it's an oligodendroglioma, except, an astro-oligodendroglioma. Except it's not, because that classification doesn't exist anymore. In the last 8 years, that's been removed, no longer exists. So it would probably be called an anaplastic astrocytoma now, grade 3, which is what it was 8 years ago or 10 years ago. And life expectancy, median life expectancy is about 3 years for that. So obviously that's nonsense and irrelevant to me. I've already lived for 10 years. So I'd expect another 10 years at least from here, but I'm aiming for a little bit more than that. I know that it's possible to create a full reversal of a grade 4 glioblastoma, as many people have. It's becoming increasingly common. And with an IDH1 mutation as I have, I'm in the better boat. It's a better type of grade 3, so some of the therapies that those people have used may have similar benefits to myself. And as I say, I'll go into more detail of the protocol that I'm utilizing, both to support neurogenesis and also to support the death of those cancer cells in another video. So brain cancer, that's one thing, and then there's, and in terms of treatment, I'm in ongoing conversations with oncologists and radiologists, but short story is nothing for now, and my sense is I won't be utilising any of the therapies that are currently available, just based upon the evidence, unless someone can present better data or research than I've currently seen. And then there is the recovery, so the healing the brain from the trauma and the injury, and regaining the capacity to walk and to use my left arm as I previously did. well, that's probably even more unknowable. Again, I know it's possible to recover fully from this. I know it's also true that there are degrees of impairment at this point, nearly 2 months on. On the one hand is no time at all, and on the other hand is a fair amount of time has passed that might cause some experts to doubt what degree of recovery is possible. And I know that it's possible for this brain and this body to recover fully, whether that's 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 years, I couldn't say. So, I'd like to be more involved with the madness that's unfolding here in Victoria, Australia, where people are being forced to take medicines that have no effect upon transmission, so therefore have no moral or medical justification for the taking of these medicines other than in a voluntary capacity. I'd love to be more involved with that. But clearly my job right now is to take care of my brain and my body and to do all that I can each day, including minimizing stimuli and stress other than the designed stress of the physiotherapy and the occupational therapy, to very much maximize the chances of a full recovery into health of my brain from the tumor and a full recovery and function of my brain and body. Hey. So, to my friends Louise, Nick and Alan, to all my friends watching, to all my friends who have messaged me, who have sent me Reiki, who have sent me supportive messages of kindness, and just thank you so much. And to those that have supported my crowdfund, of course, thank you so much. Really looking forward to sharing a bit more in another video and to seeing you in real life and maybe on retreat or something like that, for those of you that are in Victoria. So let's see. Yep, that's possible. Thank you. So much love. May all beings be well.